In the spring of 1943, as the Allied air campaign over Europe gathered momentum, a new American fighter appeared in the skies above occupied France. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt lumbered into view with its bulbous fuselage, oversized propeller, and a silhouette that evoked more a flying milk truck than a nimble dogfighter. It was a hulking radial-engine behemoth weighing nearly 7 tons fully loaded, and German pilots could scarcely contain their derision. They called it the tin bucket, or the flying milk bottle, mocking its ungainly shape and ponderous climb rate. To the Luftwaffe's tactical elite that have been honed on the razor-sharp Messerschmitt Bf-109 and the rugged Focke-Wulf FW-190, the P-47 seemed a joke, too slow to turn, too heavy to outclimb, and too fuel-thirsty for deep penetrations. Oberleutnant Egon Meyer, a JG-2 ace with over 100 victories, reportedly quipped after downing one, "It's like shooting cows in a field." Yet within months, that laughter curdled into terror. The Thunderbolt's 850 caliber Browning M2 machine guns in sync to unleash a 30-second storm of 3,400 rounds at 850 rounds per minute per gun and transform the milk bottle into a reaper of the skies. A single burst could riddle a Messerschmitt Bf-109 in seconds, shredding wings, igniting fuel tanks, and sending debris raining earthward. This is the story of the P-47 Thunderbolt, American industrial audacity overwhelming German tactical finesse. Here's the Thunderbolt's arc, from a punchline in April 1943 to the Luftwaffe's nightmare by D-Day 1944. The P-47's origins trace to 1939, when Republic Aviation's chief designer, Alexander Kartveli, sketched a high-altitude interceptor around the revolutionary R-2800 engine. Kartveli was a Georgian émigré fleeing Bolshevik Russia. This 18-cylinder radial powerhouse, developing 2,000 horsepower, demanded a turbo-supercharger to maintain performance in the thin air above 25,000 feet. Unlike the mechanically supercharged Merlin in the P-51 Mustang, the R-2800's exhaust-driven turbo, a bulky turbine nestled in the fuselage belly, fed compressed, intercooled air to the cylinders, yielding a service ceiling of 42,000 feet and speeds topping 430 miles per hour at altitude. Kartveli built the airframe around this beast, a 40-foot 9-inch wingspan, 36-foot length, and armored cockpit, cocooned in 0.5-inch steel plate. 8.50 caliber M2s, 4 per wing in staggered boxes, carried 425 rounds each, totaling 3,400, enabling sustained fire that no Axis fighter could match. Empty, it weighed 10,000 pounds. Combat loaded, nearly 18,000, heavier than many twin-engine bombers. Kartveli quipped, "It will be a dinosaur, but a well-proportioned one." Powered by a turbo-supercharged Pratt & Whitney R-2800 double wasp engine that thrived where Luftwaffe radials gasped for air above 30,000 feet, the P-47 didn't just fight, it overwhelmed. In less than 2 years, mass production turned Mockery into Jabo fever, the Luftwaffe slang for the panic induced by the Jug's distinctive engine roar heralding incoming devastation. But in the earlier days, doubts plagued the prototype. The XP-47B's first flight on May 6, 1941, revealed teething issues, turbo wastegates jammed, causing compressor stalls, and the narrow-blade propeller limited low-altitude climb to a sluggish 1,800 feet per minute. By Pearl Harbor, only 171 P-47Bs were rolling off Republic's Farmingdale, New York line, a trickle compared to the Luftwaffe's 1,000-plus monthly fighters. Subcontractors like Curtiss-Wright and Goodyear ramped up, but early models suffered from hydraulic leaks and canopy jettison failures, claiming 15 pilots in training crashes. Declassified USAAF technical order reports from 1942 reveal engineers iterating furiously. Self-sealing fuel tanks added 500 pounds but saved lives, while intercooler scoops under the exhaust stacks reduced drag by 10%. Yet the real magic was the turbo. At 30,000 feet, where BF-109 lost 30% power, the P-47 hit peak 2,300 horsepower with water methanol injection, outpacing foes by 50 miles per hour. German intelligence, via captured Abwehr documents, dismissed it as overbuilt for altitude, useless low. They couldn't have been more wrong, but at the start it looked like it. The 56th Fighter Group, Zemke's Wolfpack, arrived in England in January 1943 aboard the RMS Queen Elizabeth. Based at RAF Halesworth, they received 60 Razorback P-47C models with sliding canopies and trained amid skepticism. And RAF Spitfire pilots, fresh from the Channel, scoffed. "You'll be sitting ducks for 1-9s. This was when it was fashionable to insult the P-47. But Colonel Hubert Zemke, being a pre-war tactician, pushed gunnery quals, even though bad weather grounded many, including Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson, a 22-year-old Oklahoman retrained from bombers. The combat baptism came April 8, 1943. 12 P-47s from the 4th Fighter Group swept over France at 27,000 feet. Radio glitches aborted the mission, but on April 15th, Major Don Blakesley downed an FW-190, the Jug's first kill. German aces pounced. JG-26's Abbeville Kids, led by Joseph Priller, exploited the P-47's weaknesses, its poor initial climb and turn radius. In a May 13th clash over Antwerp, 8 P-47s tangled with 16 BF-109s. 3 Jugs fell, riddled by 20mm cannon. So why was the P-47 designed this way? The P-47's distinctive mockable design stemmed from deliberate engineering choices that put performance over aesthetics. Wartime pressures amplified its ungainly form. In 1939 to 1940, the U.S. Army Air Corps favored liquid-cooled inline engines for fighters, influenced by European trends like the Schneider Trophy races, where high power seemed tied to liquid cooling for better drag. Republic's initial XP-47A prototype used a V-1710, but testing revealed reliability issues, overheating, and vulnerability to battle damage since the radiators were easy targets. Kartveli pivoted to the air-cooled R2800, an 18-cylinder, 2-row radial delivering 2,000 to 2,300 horsepower. Radials were proven in U.S. Navy aircraft, for instance, the F-4U Corsair, and less prone to coolant leaks. As Frederick Rentschler of Pratt & Whitney lobbied General Hap Arnold, "A good engine now beats an ideal one later." This choice to protect the radiator and other crucial components was finalized in 1940. It therefore bulked up the nose. The engine alone was 4 feet in diameter, wider than a BF-109's entire fuselage. The P-47 was conceived as a high-altitude interceptor to escort bombers over 30,000 feet, where oxygen-thinned air starved non-turbo engines. Kartveli borrowed the P-43's belly-mounted turbo design, but scaled it for the R2800. The turbo was an exhaust-driven turbine, and it was buried in the aft fuselage for balance and protection, requiring about 43 feet of ducting for intake, air scooped under the nose, compressed, intercooled, and fed forward, and 19 feet for exhaust pipes. This thicket of plumbing filled the belly, swelling the fuselage cross-section to 10 feet wide at points, 4 times the volume of a Spitfire 5. Intercooler doors and wastegates added vents and bulges. USAAC specs demanded 8.50 caliber machine guns with 3,400 rounds up from 6 in prototypes, requiring deep wing root bays and ammo chutes. Its fuel tanks and self-sealing liners added girth. It has an armored cockpit tub with half-inch steel and provisions for 2,500-pound bombs and rockets. This payload calls for a robust, wide airframe. The elliptical wing from Seversky Designs was enlarged for lift, but the fuselage grew to house retracting gear without draggy external pods. So while the P-47 can be called ugly, its strengths should not have been underestimated, but the Germans had grown overconfident. When the 4th Fighter Group ex-RAF Eagle Squadron pilots received P-47Cs in 1943, they derided it as a 7-ton milk bottle due to the bulbous, jug-like silhouette typical of glass milk jugs in the 1940s. RAF Spitfire pilots even joked, "Hide in the fuselage from Luftwaffe attacks." Germans called it Der Blechkübel, tin bucket, for its ponderous look versus sleek Bf-109s. Its climb at 1,800 feet per minute initial and wide turns made it seem like flying a bathtub. The Razorback canopy and exhaust stacks added to the dinosaur vibe. The very features that invited ridicule proved decisive advantages, turning the P-47 from punchline to Luftwaffe terror by 1944. The bulky form wasn't a flaw. As Ace James Goodson noted, initial skepticism gave way to appreciation. It could take punishment no other fighter could. Aft placement protected from frontal fire, and ducts acted as armor against ground flak. It has a barn-like profile with its 40 feet wingspan and covering over 300 square feet area. At over 500 miles per hour terminal velocity, it outdives all enemy aircrafts for hit and zoom tactics, and it boasts 5 feet more span than Spitfire Vive for stability in ground attacks. Its armored and spacious cockpit has a deep fuselage for tub and guns, roomy bathtub, with an incredible pilot survival rate of 90% plus. The bubble canopy in D models gives 360 degrees visibility and can take over 267 hits. Modular fuselage extension. The extra 8-inch stretch for QEC added to lumbering length, extending its modular fuselage. This cut maintenance by 60% and enabled 746,000 sorties with just 11 losses per 10,000. The engineers learnt a lot from the P-47 performances in 1943, so they improved handling going forward. The P-47's ugly bulk was a calculated trade-off. It sacrificed agility for endurance and power, excelling in dive bombing, destroying 68,000 trucks and high-altitude dominance, from which it claimed 3,752 air kills. The U.S. pilot Johnson had its first sortie on April 18th with the 61st FS. It was largely uneventful since it was an escort for B-17S over Lille. But May brought horror. Over Antwerp, his P-47 absorbed 20mm hits. He said, "The stick bucked like a mule. Coolant sprayed my face." He nursed it home, belly landing sans gear. Debrief logs note 15 holes, mostly superficial. The radial engine's air cooling shrugged off damage that would doom a liquid-cooled Merlin. It would remind the Allied forces of the June attack in 1943. On June 26, 1943, over Forges-les-Eaux, 48 P-47s from the 56th escorted B-17 returnees from Villacoublay. Ambushed by 16 FW-190 A's of 2nd JG-26, the jugs scattered. Johnson's mount, Half Pint, trailed the formation. Oberleutnant Kurt Mayer, Egon's brother with 30 kills, slashed in from 6 o'clock high. 21 20mm shells and over 207.92mm rounds hammered the fuselage, hydraulics ruptured, canopy shattered, oil blinded the windshield. It was a disaster thousands of feet in the sky. The cockpit filled with smoke. Instruments spun wild. Johnson yanked the stick. Nothing. The 190 circled for the kill, guns winking. Then, miracle, trimmed tabs a bit, and he dove, trailing fire. Johnson crash-landed at Manston, his P-47 perforated into a sieve. 267 holes counted before mechanics quit, yet the structure intact. That day cost 5 P-47s, 2 pilots KIA, a 10% loss rate. The Germans claimed 6 victories, yet whispers spread. The Jug took punishment no Bf-109 could. The P-47's salvation lay in its guns. 8 wing-mounted M2s, fed from fused boxes 350 to 425 rounds each, in sync through a computing site for 20 to 30-second bursts. At 2,900 feet per second muzzle velocity, .50 API rounds punched 0.5-inch armor at 500 yards. Tracers guided the storm. Combat reports from the 78th FG, July 1943, detail a typical engagement. Lieutenant Armin Peterson, facing a Bf-109G, boasted in a private report, "Squeezed trigger at 400 yards, 800 rounds per minute per gun, lead converged, canopy disintegrated, 109 shed wing spiraled in flames. Time to destruction, 3 seconds. Statistical analysis from 8th Air Force logs declassified in the 70s shows P-47s averaging 4.6 to 1 kill ratios in 1943 to 44, thanks to ammo volume. A Mustang 6 guns fired 1,880 rounds. The Jug's 8, 3,400, 81% more firepower. No evasion is possible against that wall. 21 cannon holes, 200-plus bullet punctures, yet the R-2800 ran on 1 cylinder, prop intact. Johnson wrote, "Oil everywhere, but the radial laughed at it." Self-sealing tanks and armored glass deflected vitals. The air-cooled engine, unlike the 109's DB601, needed no radiator vulnerable to flak. 8th AF reports tally 824 P-47 combat losses from 746,000 sorties, 0.11% rate, lowest among fighters. Jug returns from missions 109S can't dream of, and with turbo power at 30,000 feet, the turbo supercharger defined the P-47's edge. Exhaust gases spun the turbine to 21,000 revs per minute, compressing intake air at 2.5 to 1, intercooled to 100 degrees Fahrenheit before cylinders. At 30,000 feet, where FW-19s dropped to 1,500 horsepower, the Jug peaked at 2,300, 50% more. By July 1943, the 8th Air Force had absorbed the bitter lessons of April to June. The P-47's early losses, 28 aircraft in the first 60 days of combat, forced a doctrinal overhaul. Colonel Hubert "Hub" Zemke, commander of the 56th Fighter Group, convened a series of post-mortem debriefs at RAF Halesworth. Declassified minutes from these sessions, held in a smoke-filled Nissen hut, reveal a pragmatic shift. Stop trying to turn with the Luftwaffe. Zemke's directive scrawled in his logbook on the 14th of July. Use speed and altitude. Dive, shoot, zoom. Never dogfight below 25,000 feet. Pilots adapted. The P-47's 2,800 horsepower at takeoff translated into a 500-plus miles per hour dive, faster than any German fighter could follow without structural failure. A 4th Fighter Group combat report from 17 August 1943 illustrates the new tactic. Lieutenant Dwayne Beeson spotted 4 FW-190 at 28,000 feet, rolled inverted, pushed throttle to war emergency, 70 inches, HG. Closed from 800 to 300 yards in 8 seconds. 8.50s fired 1.2-second burst, 190's port wing detached. Pulled 6 grams recovering at 12,000 feet. The kill was confirmed by gun camera film now preserved at the National Archives. German pilots noticed. A captured Kriegstagebuch, or War Diary entry, from 2nd JG-26, dated 22nd August, read, "American Thunderbolts refuse horizontal combat. They strike from above like falcons, then vanish into the sun. Our 109s cannot match their dive speed. Recommend bounce only when P-47s are low on fuel." The Mockery began to fade. The P-47's 425 rounds per gun was not just firepower, it was sustained firepower. A Bf-109G6 carried 60 rounds of 20 mm, 1 3-second burst, and 500 rounds of 7.92 mm per mg, 131. An FW-190A8 had 140 to 175 20 mm rounds. In contrast, a P-47 pilot could fire 4 7-second bursts or 8 3-second bursts before bingo. 8th Air Force gunnery reports show average engagement time increased from 2.1 seconds, April 1943, to 4.8 seconds, October 1943, as pilots learned to walk their fire. Lieutenant Brown's diary, 14th of October. Chased a 109 through cloud, held trigger 5 seconds. Tracers painted his spine. He blew up at 24,000 feet, still had 1,200 rounds left. The turbo's secret, intercooler doors, and the jug driver's prayer. The Pratt & Whitney R2800's turbo supercharger was a mechanical marvel, but fragile. Exhaust gases spun the turbine to 21,300 revolutions per minute, compressing intake air to 17 pounds per square inch before the intercooler reduced temperature from 400 degrees Fahrenheit to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. 2 hydraulically actuated doors under the fuselage regulated this alchemy. If they jammed open, manifold pressure dropped. If closed, the engine cooked. A 56th Fighter Group Technical Bulletin, 1st of September 1943, issued the jug driver's prayer, a pre-flight checklist memorized by rote. Doors, doors, check the doors. Wastegate free, oil temperature low, turbo spins, intercooler glows. If she coughs at 30 grand, dive for home with prayer in hand. Failures were common early on. Johnson's 26th June ordeal included a stuck wastegate he manually trimmed to 22 inches HG to limp home. By autumn, Republic retrofitted electric actuators. Reliability soared from 68% to 94% per 100 hours. Robert Johnson's revenge, 27 kills, and the lucky bastard certificate. Johnson returned to combat in August 1943, his patched-up half-pint replaced by a new P-47D5RE. He scored his first kill on 4 August, a Bf-110 over Kiel, then racked up victories at a pace rivaling German aces. His gun camera reels, declassified in 1978, show clinical precision, a 3-second burst into an FW-190's cockpit on 27th September, the pilot ejecting as the aircraft cartwheeled. By March 1944, Johnson had 27 victories, all in P-47s. The 56th FG awarded him the Lucky Bastard certificate for surviving 100 missions, a macabre honor. His final entry before rotation home, 8th of May, 1944. The jug took 200 holes and gave me 27 scalps. Germany laughed in April 43. Who's laughing now? The P-47's Achilles heel was range. Early C models carried 305 gallons internal, barely enough for London-Cologne escorts. The 17th of August 1943 Schweinfurt-Regensburg raid exposed this. 60 B-17 lost, many to fighters after P-47s turned back at the German border. Republic rushed 75-gallon pressed paper drop tanks into production. First combat use, 27th September 1943, Emden raid. Range jumped to 475 miles, deep into the Reich. A 4th FG report, tanks jettisoned at Eupen. engaged 30 plus Bf-109s over Bonn, claimed 11 destroyed, 3 probables, returned on fumes. By November, 108 Galland tanks extended escort to Berlin. Luftwaffe intelligence per a captured OKL memo panicked. American escorts now penetrate to 400 kilometers. Our intercept window shrinks to 20 minutes. Operation Argument, Big Week, targeted German aircraft factories. P-47s, now D-10s with paddle props and 108 Galland tanks, flew top cover at 30,000 feet. The 56th Fighter Group alone claimed 98 victories in 6 days. Kill ratio, 7.7 to 1. German records confirm approximately 100 losses, many to P-47s. Gabreski's 22nd February log bounced 12-190s near Leipzig. The paddle prop is a bit like a shark, down 2, both exploded midair, ammo still 40% when RTB. P-47 kill rate per sortie rose 42% post-paddle from February to May, 1944 through to October to January. Early narrow toothpick props crippled low-altitude performance. The January 1944 Curtiss paddle blade upgrade, 13-foot diameter, Hamilton Standard Hydromatic, boosted climb 40% to 3,200 feet per minute, top speed 433 miles per hour. The Luftwaffe reaction was nothing but pure shock. JG2 logs reveal that they admit P-47 climbs with them now, and old evasion is gone. In Big Week of February 1944, paddle jugs claimed 200-plus kills per USS TAF stats. By D-Day, P-47s shifted to fighter bomber, 2,500-pound bomb loads, HVAR rockets. The R-2800's growl induced Jabo fever, panic at incoming Jabos. That's what Germans call fighter bombers. The P-47 destroyed 86,000 rail cars, 9,000 locos, 68,000 trucks. In Operation Cobra from July 1944, the 405th FG wrecked 122 tanks near Ronsi. The pilot account, Lieutenant Glenn Schlitz, gave the account that he dove on a convoy, 50 calibers and rockets, and trucks flipped like toys. Germany's aces, Galland Milders, wielded brilliance, hit-and-run altitude traps. But U.S. industry drowned them. Republic's Evansville plant alone built 6,242 P-47s. Total output was just 15,693 P-47s against Luftwaffe's 96,000 fighters over 6 years. But Allies flew 3-1 numerically by 1944. Quantity has a quality all its own. From 300 per month in 1943 to 1,000 by 1944, jugs flooded fields, replacing losses overnight. Luftwaffe production choked while Allied raids halved output by 1944. Aces died. 80% of JG-26 gone by VE Day. Pilot diaries revealed endless yanks. Tactics mean nothing against hordes. Mockery lasted months, but the terror from Jabos, years. American might, 300,000 aviation workers, $50 billion invested, outproduced German genius, turning skies from contested to Allied domain. The jug proved, in aerial war, numbers plus resilience crush skill alone. With air superiority looming, IX Fighter Command re-rolled P-47s as Jabos. The 362nd Fighter Group under Colonel Joe Laughlin pioneered low-level tactics. Armament, 2 500-pound bombs, 8 HVAR rockets, 8.50s. First mass Jabo mission, 7th of May 1944, rail yards at Hasselt. 48 P-47s destroyed 38 locomotives, 112 rail cars. The classified report was to dive from 8,000 feet, release at 3,000, pull 5G, 50 strafed flak towers on egress, but they lost 1 to 20 millimeters. German troop morale crumbled. A Wehrmacht field report, 12th of May, read, "Jabo fever epidemic. Men freeze at engine sound. Locomotives abandoned. Recommend dispersal and camo nets." Republic's Farmingdale plant hit 300 P-47s per month by June 1943. Evansville, Indiana, added 254 per month by December. Subcontractors, Curtiss, Goodyear, North American, built wings, fuselages, tails. Total workforce was 48,000, many women included too, through Rosie the Riveter. Germany could not match this industrial might. 25th of July 1944, 1,508th 9th AF bombers and 500 P-47s struck German lines near St. Lo. The 405th Fighter Group, flying from RAF Christchurch, delivered the coup de grace. Mission report from 25th July was quite chilling. 48 P-47s, 500-pound GP bombs plus 8 times HVAR each. Target, Panzergruppe, West Column, Ronsi. First wave bombed 0810 to 0820. Second wave rocketed 0830 to 0845. Results: 122 tanks, 260 trucks, 11 SP guns destroyed or abandoned. German crews fled into fields. Gun camera footage showed P-47s diving through flak, rockets streaking into Tiger I turrets, .50 igniting fuel bowsers. A German Panzer IV commander's diary, captured 27th July. "The Jabos came like hornets. No warning. My tank brewed up in seconds. The crew bailed out, machine-gunned in the open." By August 1944, 20,000 German troops had been trapped in the Falaise Argentan pocket. P-47S flew 1,200 sorties in 72 hours. IX Tactical Air Combat Summary. 86,000 rail cars equivalent in vehicles destroyed, roads choked with burning wrecks, survivors surrendered en masse. Lieutenant Colonel Dave Schilling, 62nd FS, radiolog, 19th August. Tally-ho, convoy 40 trucks 6 miles east Chambois, rolling in hot, guns, guns, guns. Followed by roadblocked, secondary explosions, good hits. In September 1944, Me-262 jet fighters entered combat. They were fast, cruising at 540 miles per hour, but fragile. P-47S used altitude ambush. First jet kill was 28th August. Lieutenant William Lyons from 78th FG downed a Me-262 near Brussels, with a 4-second burst into the starboard engine. Total Me-262 losses to P-47s were 20, confirmed. A 56th FG pilot's note: "Jets fast on straight, but turn like trucks. Caught one in a paddle prop climb, flamed both engines." The P-47 didn't win by grace. It won by refusing to die. In 1940, we laughed at Spitfires. In 1943, at Thunderbolts. By 1944, we hid when we heard that radial roar. It was not the plane. It was the endless planes. German pilots who mocked its shape in April 1943 were dead, captured, or cowering by May 1945. The 8.50s did not just kill, they erased tactical brilliance under sheer volume. The turbo engine dominated the stratosphere, the paddle prop closed the climb gap, and American factories, 48,000 workers, 24/7 shifts, assembly lines humming like beehives, ensured no loss was irreplaceable. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, affectionately nicknamed the Jug for its rotund, barrel-like fuselage, was often mocked by pilots and ground crews alike for its ungainly appearance. At over 36 feet long, with a massive 42-foot wingspan and a weight exceeding 17,500 pounds when fully loaded, it resembled a flying tank, more than a sleek fighter. Powered by a 2,800 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R 2800 radial engine, Its bulbous nose and thick wings were dictated by the need to house a supercharger, 8.50 caliber machine guns, and up to 2,500 pounds of bombs or rockets. Critics, including some RAF pilots who tested early models, derided it as ridiculous, or 7 tons of awkwardness, arguing its shape made it slow to maneuver, compared to nimble foes like the Messerschmitt B F-109 or Focke-Wulf FW-190. Yet, in the frozen hell of the Ardennes during the Battle of the Bulge, the P-47's robust design proved decisive in turning the tide against a massive German offensive, saving the besieged town of Bastogne and blunting Hitler's last gamble in the West. On December 16, 1944, Adolf Hitler launched Operation Wacht am Rhein, a desperate counteroffensive through the densely forested Ardennes region of Belgium and Luxembourg. Aiming to split Allied forces, capture the vital port of Antwerp, and force a negotiated peace, the Germans committed over 400,000 troops, 1,400 tanks and assault guns, and 2,600 artillery pieces, their largest attack on the Western Front. Poor weather grounded Allied air power for the first week, allowing German panzers to advance rapidly. By December 19th, the U.S. 101st Airborne Division under Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe was encircled at Bastogne, a key road junction. Surrounded by elements of the German 5th Panzer Army, including the 2nd Panzer Division and Panzer Lehr, the paratroopers faced relentless artillery barrages, tank assaults, and sub-zero temperatures with dwindling supplies. The Allies' situation was dire. Fog, snow, and low clouds prevented air support, and ground reinforcements struggled through clogged roads. Bastogne's defenders, outnumbered 5-1, held out amid ammunition shortages and frostbite casualties. On December 22nd, German envoys demanded surrender. McAuliffe's one-word reply, "Nuts," became legendary, but without air intervention, the pocket risked collapse. Christmas Eve brought a miracle for the Allies, clearing skies. The U.S. 8th and 9th Air Forces unleashed their fighter bombers with the 9th Tactical Air Command's P-47 groups, primarily from the 406th, 362nd, and 365th Fighter Groups, leading the charge. These jugs, operating from bases in France and Belgium, were tasked with close air support, interdiction, and armored column destruction. Despite their ridiculous shape, which imposed a lower top speed around 433 miles per hour at altitude and poorer low-level agility than lighter fighters, the P-47s excelled in the dive bombing and strafing roles demanded by the Bulge. On December 23rd, over 600 sorties hammered German supply lines. P-47S of the 406th Fighter Group, led by figures like Colonel Anthony V. Grosetta, dove through flak to target panzer columns near St. Vith and Houffalize. Armed with 500-pound bombs, M10 rocket launchers firing 4.5-inch high-velocity rockets, and their 8 Browning M2 machine guns firing 3,400 rounds per minute combined, they shredded unescorted convoys. The Thunderbolt's radial engine and armored cockpit allowed it to absorb battle damage that would fell slimmer aircraft. Pilots routinely returned with cylinders shot away or wings holed by 20mm cannon fire. The climax came on Christmas Day. As German forces massed for a final push on Bastogne, P-47s from the 362nd Fighter Group, the Daisy May Squadron, and others intercepted a column of the 2nd Panzer Division near Celle, west of the town. In a series of low-level attacks, Thunderbolts destroyed or disabled over 50 vehicles, including 15 Panther and Tiger tanks. Pilots like Lieutenant Colonel Joe Laughlin reported diving from 8,000 feet to treetop level, releasing bombs in 70-degree plunges before pulling up. A maneuver the P-47's sturdy airframe handled superbly thanks to its high wing loading and powerful engine. On December 26th, the relief of Bastogne began when Lieutenant General George S. Patton's Third Army linked up with the 101st, but air power had already broken the sieges back. That day, P-47s flew 1,200 sorties, claiming 162 tanks, 735 vehicles, and 66 artillery pieces destroyed, per U.S. Army Air Force's after-action reports. One notable action involved the 365th Fighter Group Hellhawks under Colonel Lance Call, which ambushed a fuel convoy near the Orth River, igniting explosions that lit the snowy night and halted the 9th Panzer Division's advance. The P-47's ridiculous shape was its salvation. The massive propeller and engine provided unmatched low-altitude power for ground attacks, while its durability, boasting self-sealing fuel tanks and 1,000 pounds of cockpit armor, allowed survival rates triple those of early P-51 Mustangs in similar roles. German flak and small arms fire claimed only a fraction of the 700-plus P-47s committed. Many limped home on 7 cylinders. Outcome and legacy. By January 1945, the Bulge offensive collapsed. The Germans suffered 80,000 to 100,000 casualties, lost over 600 tanks, and exhausted their reserves, accelerating the Allied advance into Germany. P-47 units alone were credited with destroying over 1,000 armored vehicles and 3,000 trucks during the campaign. Bastogne's defense, bolstered by Thunderbolt strikes, became a symbol of Allied resilience. The P-47 won not despite its shape, but because of it. What looked awkward enabled it to lug heavy ordnance, withstand punishment, and deliver devastating blows in the mud and snow where elegance failed. As pilot Robert S. Johnson later wrote in Thunderbolt, "She was ugly, but she could fight." Over 15,600 P-47s were built, and in the European theater they flew more ground attack sorties than any other U.S. fighter, proving form followed function in the crucible of war. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt's offensive capabilities were nothing short of extraordinary, transforming what many initially saw as an oversized, ungainly fighter into one of the most feared ground attack aircraft of World War II. Its firepower began with 8.50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns, 4 mounted in each wing. These guns delivered a combined rate of fire of 6,400 rounds per minute. Using armor-piercing incendiary ammunition, a single 3-second burst could unleash over 300 rounds, equivalent to the output of an infantry platoon. Pilots strafed at convergence ranges of 250 to 300 yards, and with the introduction of the K-14 gyroscopic gunsight in late 1944, accuracy against moving targets improved dramatically. On December 23, 1944, near St. Vith, a lone P-47 from the 406th Fighter Group destroyed 7 half-tracks in a single low-level pass, igniting fuel and ammunition with pinpoint .50 caliber fire. Beyond its guns, the P-47 excelled as a bomb platform, capable of carrying up to 2,500 pounds of ordnance across 10 underwing hardpoints and 1 centerline station. A typical loadout included 3 500-pound general-purpose bombs, though configurations varied, a 1,000-pound bomb under the fuselage, with 2 500-pounders on the wings for anti-tank or bridge missions, or 6 100-pound fragmentation clusters for troop concentrations. Pilots favored steep 60 to 70-degree dive bombing attacks, initiating from 8,000 feet, releasing at 3,000 feet, and pulling out below 1,500 feet. Late-model P-47s with dive brakes achieved a circular error of about 100 feet from 5,000 feet. During the relief of Bastogne on December 26, 1944, Thunderbolts flew over 1,200 sorties and dropped 671 tons of bombs, accounting for 81 tanks, 127 artillery pieces, and 332 vehicles in a single day. The P-47 also introduced rocket warfare to the European theater with deadly effectiveness. It typically carried 10 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rockets, each with a 45-pound high-explosive warhead and a shaped charge capable of penetrating 75 millimeters of rolled homogeneous armor. Fired in ripples from 1,000 feet at speeds near 300 miles per hour, these rockets followed a flat, fast trajectory that improved hit probability over bombs. Some units used the earlier M10 4.5-inch bazooka tubes, which offered slightly better penetration at shorter ranges. The 362nd Fighter Group reported destroying 1 tank for every 18 rockets fired between January and May 1945. In a coordinated strike, a P-47 might dive to drop bombs on lead vehicles, strafe the column with machine guns while pulling up, then roll and fire rockets into the rear, neutralizing an entire armored unit in under a minute. What made the Thunderbolt's offensive power sustainable was its remarkable durability. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 radial engine could operate with multiple cylinders destroyed, and over 1,000 pounds of armor protected the pilot, oil cooler, and turbo supercharger. Self-sealing fuel tanks and a robust airframe allowed the aircraft to absorb 20-millimeter cannon fire and return home. Francis Gabreski, one of the top American aces, once landed with 108 holes in his P-47, including a 20-millimeter round through the propeller hub, and flew again the next day. This resilience meant P-47 units could maintain pressure even under intense anti-aircraft fire, flying sortie after sortie while lighter fighters were grounded or lost. In the European theater alone, P-47s flew over 423,000 combat sorties, more than half of all U.S. ground attack missions, despite comprising only a quarter of the fighter inventory. They destroyed or damaged approximately 6,000 tanks and self-propelled guns, 6,162 locomotives, over 86,000 rail cars, 65,000 trucks, more than 1,100 bridges, and nearly 3,000 enemy aircraft on the ground. In the Pacific, long-range P-47s carried napalm, 3,000-pound bomb loads, and even the massive Tiny Tim 11.75-inch rocket against Japanese fortifications. During the Iwo Jima campaign in February 1945, Thunderbolts delivered 1,200 tons of napalm and high explosives in just 10 days, softening defenses for the Marine landings. German commanders came to dread the P-47 above all Allied aircraft. General Fritz Bayerlein of the Panzer Lehr Division, after surviving the Falaise pocket, declared that when the sky cleared and the Jabo with the big nose appeared, the battle was lost. The Thunderbolt did not win through speed or elegance, it won through sheer destructive persistence. It carried more ordnance farther, struck harder, and survived longer than any contemporary fighter. In the end, the P-47's offensive legacy was not measured in air-to-air kills, but in the thousands of tanks, trains, and supply lines it turned into burning wreckage, paving the road from Normandy to Berlin. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt arrived late to the Pacific War, but once it did, especially in its long-range P-47N variant, it became a decisive instrument of American island-hopping strategy, delivering sustained, heavy, and precise destruction against Japanese fortifications, airfields, shipping, and troop concentrations from the Philippines to Okinawa and beyond. Unlike the European theater, where the P-47 operated from forward bases in France and Belgium, the Pacific demanded extreme range, rugged field performance, and the ability to strike targets scattered across thousands of miles of ocean. The Thunderbolt met these demands and, in doing so, helped compress the final year of the war in the Pacific. Initial deployments of the P-47 in the Pacific began in mid-1943, with P-47Ds operating from New Guinea under the 5th Air Force. These early models were limited by range. Internal fuel gave them only about 800 miles round-trip combat radius, but with 108-gallon drop tanks under each wing and a 150-gallon belly tank, they could escort B-25s and A-20 on medium-range strikes. Their first major combat came during the Battle of the Bismarck Sea aftermath and the reduction of Rabaul. Operating from Dobodura and Port Moresby, P-47s of the 348th Fighter Group flew top cover and ground attack missions against Japanese barge traffic, coastal guns, and airfields on New Britain. The radial engine's resistance to salt corrosion and battle damage proved ideal in the humid, dusty jungle strips, where P-51s and P-38s often struggled with maintenance. By early 1944, the Thunderbolt had replaced the P-40 and P-39 in most 5th Air Force squadrons. Pilots quickly adapted the European Jabo tactics to the Pacific environment. Low-level skip bombing against shipping, napalm drops on cave positions, and rocket attacks on parked aircraft. One standout unit, the 35th Fighter Group, earned the nickname the Possum Hunters for night harassment missions over Wewak, where P-47s dropped 100-pound fragmentation bombs and strafed with 50-caliber fire under flares. These missions disrupted Japanese resupply and morale, contributing to the starvation and isolation of the Wewak garrison. The true game-changer arrived in early 1945 with the P-47N, designed specifically for the Pacific. This variant featured a new wet wing with integral fuel tanks, increasing internal capacity to 566 gallons, nearly double the P-47D. With two 150-gallon drop tanks, the P-47N achieved a ferry range of over 2,300 miles and a combat radius exceeding 1,000 miles. It could now fly from Saipan to Tokyo and back, or from Leyte to Formosa, without staging. The first P-47s reached the 318th Fighter Group on Ayashima in May 1945, just in time for the Okinawa campaign. On Okinawa, Thunderbolts flew from crude coral airstrips under constant mortar and kamikaze threat. Their mission was Close Air Support, CAS, for the U.S. 10th Army, then locked in brutal combat against the Japanese 32nd Army, entrenched in the Shuri Line. P-47Ns carried napalm, a new weapon perfected in the Pacific. Each aircraft could drop two 165-gallon napalm tanks, creating firestorms that flushed Japanese troops from caves and bunkers. On June 4, 1945, 8 P-47s from the 333rd Fighter Squadron dropped napalm on Conical Hill, burning out a regiment of defenders in minutes and allowing Marines to seize the position with minimal casualties. The P-47N also hunted Japanese shipping. Armed with Tiny Tim 11.75-inch rockets, massive 500-pound anti-ship weapons, with a 150-pound warhead, Thunderbolts sank destroyers, coastal freighters, and even a light cruiser off the Sakishima Islands. The rocket's blunt nose and high speed allowed it to punch through deck armor before detonating inside the hull. On July 14, 1945, Lieutenant Oscar Perdomo of the 507th Fighter Group used Tiny Tims to sink a 3,000-ton transport in a single pass. The last confirmed aerial victory of the war, Perdomo became an ace that day, downing 4 Japanese aircraft in the same mission. As the invasion of Japan loomed, Operation Downfall, P-47Ns were tasked with softening the home islands. From bases on Iwo Jima and soon Okinawa, they escorted B-29s, strafed airfields, and attacked rail networks. On August 7, 1945, 120 P-47s from the 413th, 318th, and 507th Fighter Groups struck airfields around Tokyo, destroying 38 aircraft on the ground and damaging locomotives and marshalling yards. Had the atomic bombs not ended the war, these same Thunderbolts were slated to lead the air assault on Kyushu in November 1945, dropping napalm and 1,000-pound bombs ahead of the invasion fleet. In total, P-47s in the Pacific flew over 80,000 combat sorties, dropped 115,000 tons of bombs, and fired 135 million rounds of 50 caliber ammunition. They sank or damaged 1,200 vessels, destroyed 3,000-plus aircraft, mostly on the ground, and obliterated countless bunkers, supply dumps, and troop concentrations. The 318th Fighter Group alone claimed over 500 ground targets in the Ryukyus. Unlike Europe, where P-47s shared the stage with Typhoons and Il-2s, in the Pacific they were the primary fighter-bomber of the 5th and 7th Air Forces from 1944 onward. The Thunderbolt's success in the Pacific rested on three pillars: range, payload, and survivability. The P-47N could reach any target from Luzon to Hokkaido. It carried more ordnance, up to 3,000 pounds, than any other single-engine fighter in theater, and its radial engine and armored construction allowed it to return from missions over water with battle damage that would doom liquid-cooled aircraft. Pilots routinely landed with cylinders shot away, wings holed by 20mm fire, or control surfaces shredded by suicide boat machine guns. Japanese troops came to fear the P-47 as much as their German counterparts feared the Jabo. On Okinawa, soldiers called it the four-bladed devil for the distinctive sound of its massive propeller at low altitude. A captured diary from a Japanese officer on Ayashima read, "When the big American fighter with the round engine comes, we hide in the earth. It drops fire and death from the sky." In the end, the P-47 did not just support the Pacific campaign, it accelerated its conclusion. By isolating garrisons, destroying logistics, and breaking fortified defenses, it turned the vast ocean into a series of American stepping stones. When the war ended on September 2, 1945, aboard USS Missouri, P-47Ns flew overhead in formation, a final salute from the Juggernaut that helped make victory possible. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel